Welcome to the Awakening podcast. My guest is no stranger to the show. Today is our seventh episode, and the episode should wake you up to the corruption in the medical establishment and courts. If you're a new listener, I encourage you to go to awakeningpodcast.org and type Scott Schara. Other episodes, which I will include in the show notes. First one was episode 155, Amazing Grace Killed by the Hospital, told by our dad, Scott Schara, which was in May 7th, 2022. Episode 166 was in June 18th, and it's an update on Amazing Grace Killed by the Hospital, told by her dad, Scott Schara. On January the 22nd in 23, episode 201, Public Health Emergency That is Killing People, Scott Schara. And April the 29th, 2023, episode number 223, a landmark lawsuit case against doctors that killed his daughter in hospital, Scott Schara. And in July the 11th, 2024, update on the landmark COVID court case, Scott Schara. And on May the 3rd of this year, 2025, Scott Schara fights back landmark lawsuit against the hospital corruption. The background: the trial examined allegations of wrongful death, negligence, lack of informed consent, medical battery, and requests a declaratory judgment for DNR, which is do not resuscitate order, and medical combination. The plaintiff, Scott Schara, alleges killed his daughter, Grace, who has Down syndrome. This was the first wrongful death jury trial in the country for death listed as COVID-19 on the death certificate. The unique claim in this case includes medical battery and a declaratory judgment ruling regarding the DNR order and the order for 3 contradicted medications, prosthetics, lozapine, and morphine. You probably pronounce it better. And the plaintiff was Scott Schara and the estate of Grace Schara, and the defendants were Ascension Health, St. Elizabeth Hospital, and individual medical staff members. So, Scott, always a pleasure to have you back. I know it wasn't the result that we wanted.
Well, it's interesting, when you just go through that history, it's like, wow, this has been quite a battle. We started speaking out in, shortly after Grace died. Grace died October 13th of 2021, so we're coming up on 4 years. So I've been going at this for over 3.5 years now, and it's been more than full time. And, a lot of people say what you just said, that it wasn't the result we wanted. So that's, of course, true as humans. I didn't get into that court battle to lose. It's the single hardest thing I've ever worked on. I never invested so much time, energy, resources into something that I lost in. I've started 3 businesses from scratch, which is intense. And, in each case I won. But in this trial we lost. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And most of them are no surprise. That does not mean I'm not shocked by the result, because I am shocked by the result. We had a fantastic case. We had better witnesses, better experts. We had the truth on our side. And the jury got it wrong, but juries get things wrong every single day. But I was shocked just because of how well our case was laid out. The expert, one of our experts was Dr. Gilbert Burdine. We're going to be playing a clip from him in just a minute. And that clip will give you the perspective as to why I'm shocked. But I also want to tell you I'm not surprised, and I want to spend some time on why I'm not surprised as we go through this discussion today. God had other plans. So, when you get called to do something like this, you do it. His ways are different than our ways. So I'm not disappointed because I know God is still in charge. I haven't lost faith in that. And as Grace would have said, Roy, even after the verdict came down, she would have said, God did it, Dad. And so why do I still say God did it? Literally millions of people saw this trial live streamed, Roy. Just process that. For the first time, they saw the veil was lifted and they got to see what's going on behind the curtain. So uh, I'm super excited to have been part of that. And I also am excited to share with people what they can do to protect themselves if they ever end up in the situation that I was in with Grace. So, I think what we should do is roll the clip right now. And so I'll just set up the clip, Roy. This is our doctor expert. We had a nurse expert and a doctor expert. The doctor expert, Dr. Gilbert Burdine. So when he was on the stand, he spent several hours going through Grace's records and showing the jury what happened to Grace. And then he did a summary. And this is a 1.5-minute clip of the summary of what he presented to the jury. So go ahead and play that now, if you would.
Yes, of course.
The number of the breaches of standard of care I identify in my reports are too numerous to count, but some of them stand out. One was the manner by which Father Schara was evicted from the hospital and its impact on the outcome in Schara. And I found this to be shameful conduct on behalf of the hospital. The second issue were the breaches of standard of care related to informed consent. And I find it indefensible that this patient was given medications, very dangerous medications, not theoretically dangerous medications, but medications proved by the medical record to be dangerous to this patient without informed consent. The events on the 13th are very difficult to recognize. The repeated administration of Precedex on the 13th was not just a breach of the standard of care. It was insane. The administration of morphine on 10/13 to a patient who was unconscious, unresponsive, had lost her blood pressure, had no palpable pulse, and whose respiratory pattern was screaming to anybody who would look. The administration of morphine in that situation is or was worst clinical decision I have ever witnessed in over 46 years of medical practice.
So that should shock anybody when they hear that. Just a little bit more of a backdrop for Dr. Burdine. As he said, he has 46 years of medical experience. He's a Harvard grad. He took on this case after reviewing Grace's records, and he chose to not charge one penny. He has only represented defendants in the past. This is the first time he's ever represented a plaintiff. He's always represented doctors as defendants in the past. But he saw this as so egregious, he did it for no charge. I got to obviously meet him during the trial. Very gracious, humble man. And, the jury heard that not once, but they heard it twice because we used that clip. So they saw it live, but then we used that clip in our closing argument. So this is why I'm shocked. I'm shocked that the
Well,
jury.
I'm going to actually say something now because I've done a lot of research on this. I knew based on the videos that I wasn't watching it live, but looking on the thing, I knew what they were doing. And just for kind of context on this, we have talked a lot on the last 6 episodes about all the corruption that goes on. We've done our own research in different routes. 100% every single thing you've said is true. And what they did is they attacked you. They put you across as a conspiracy theorist. It's impossible to prove what's done because the whole world is orchestrated in such a way. And they attacked your character, which in turn, if the jury were part of the whole system that believed this and got jabbed, they were against you immediately. And that's what they did. And that's the reason, from what I can see and the videos that I looked, unfortunately, why you lost.
I'm in 100% agreement with that. And when we lost was actually before the trial. I mean, we'd lost really by getting into. But this is the Antichrist legal system, so you're not going to get justice and win in the system. And I'll give you some statistics. But first, about your comment, what happened before the trial? We had a pretrial hearing on May 19th and 20th. And, of course, the legal team is very much aware as to how outspoken I am. I have done over 4,000 hours of research into this medical industrial establishment, into the psyop of COVID, all those things. And I become very outspoken. Well, we, in the May 19th and 20th hearing, filed what's called motions in limine to eliminate those things that I have researched post Grace's death, because they have nothing to do with why Grace died. And the judge denied our motions in limine, and that's why the defense was able to paint me as a conspiracy theorist. And yeah, of course, that played to the crowd. Only one person stood with us in the jury. We had to get 10 of 12, or they had to get 10 of 12. Well, they got 11 of 12, and so we had one. And that one was what I believe, she was the oldest member of the jury. She was, well, I would say about my age, and it was an overall young jury. I would say low to mid 30s average age, and they played to that jury pool. And I think the lady that stood with us is representative of. So if one of 12 is 8%, I think she's representative of the true percentage of the population that actually understands the spell that we're under. So, I want to give you a couple statistics also, just to, this will blow your mind when you hear this. So where I'm getting these statistics from is the HBO documentary Bleed Out. Bleed Out was done by Steve Burrows. Steve Burrows filed a medical malpractice lawsuit in Wisconsin. And he was, or he is still well connected in Hollywood, and was able to put together this documentary. Anyway, his mom was almost killed at a hospital in Wisconsin. And the statistics that he had in the film will shock you, Roy. He said that in the state of Wisconsin, there's 27,000 patients injured or killed every year in the medical system. Out of those 27,000, there's only 22 lawsuits that go to trial. That's less than 1/10 of 1%. So that's where our lawsuit fit. We were one of 22 annually that goes to a jury trial. We're the first lawsuit in the country that went to jury trial with COVID-19 listed as the cause of death on the death certificate. So out of those 22, less than 1/10 of 1%, only 3 are won in favor of the plaintiff. So that's 3 out of 27,000. So we knew that going in. I mean, it was no surprise to me, but, we were able to use the fact that the trial was live streamed to wake up thousands of people. In fact, even Joe Rogan he had about a 2-minute comment on the trial on his program. So, I mean, that went to hundreds of millions. So that was neat to
I would love to see you on his show, because you're a fantastic guest and you're really well organized. And I think people should write in, get everyone that you know to be writing in, because that's the exposure that you need, not just the 2-minute clip. Because I saw the clip. It's like you need to have the 2 or 3 hours where you can explain like everything that we've had the discussion about. The world needs to hear that, because he's got millions of viewers, and it would be brilliant to see you getting on his show.
It would save millions of people's lives. You just wonder about these bigger shows, how controlled they are, because I've been outspoken for 3.5 years, and Grace's case is extremely well known. RFK Jr. is very familiar with Grace's case. Before he got into the position he's in, him and I were emailing regularly. But now, there's a cap over this information getting out to the public. So it's the reality. So I don't know where the Joe Rogans and Tucker Carlson's fit into that scheme of things.
Well, I've caught each one of them out. I mean, there's pictures of Joe Rogan with, I think, the grandson of the guy who created the satanic movement, and he's got a 666 stop and everything. You don't normally just do that just for the laugh of it and everything. He tends to come out and talk about things about 4 years later when the masses know about it. But at the same time, is it possible to get on and talk? It would be good, but yeah, I don't see any of the good people. They send to do the runs on the other podcasts. All the same people are doing the runs, unfortunately. But listen, the fact that the television interview, I don't know, was it Fox, were one of the things. And what I would like to say is, one, you spoke brilliantly on it, because sometimes people, and it was lovely to see both your wife and your daughter. I mean, you could see your daughter was emotional from it, but at the same time, you need emotion on the television. And I think that actually served you as well, the conversation that she actually done in front of the press.
I was surprised that the local press, ABC, NBC, and Fox, CBS, I think covered it too. But I mean, they all gave us a fair shake. That was surprising. The interviewer from Fox, he seemed to get pretty choked up over it. They all came to the press conference the next day, also, and they stayed for the entire press conference, which was about an hour and 20 minutes long. And it was, it should make an impact on people. When I say the jury got it wrong, I want to just be blunt as to what the jury decided, and why they decided it. So I'll just say why they decided it first. So what happens in a trial is that you bring in experts. So we brought in the nurse and Dr. Burdine. So I mean, you just heard from Dr. Burdine. That's powerful what he said. Well, they also bring in experts, and their experts say the opposite. So their experts say the doctor and nurse did nothing wrong. They did everything perfect. And then ultimately the jury has to decide. So this idea that people think about standards of care, so they think that this is something you can just look up in a book. Well, when you get into a trial, the standard of care is whatever comes out of the expert's mouth. So our expert said that the doctor has to provide informed consent for the overdoses Grace experienced and the meds that were used. Their expert said, nope, in a hospital, there's implied consent. And so there is no informed consent necessary. So, of course, two opposing views. Our expert, Dr. Burdine, said a DNR order has to be witnessed, it has to be signed, and there has to be a DNR bracelet put on the patient. Their expert said that if you decide to not give a pre-authorization for a ventilator, that's the same as a DNR, and a doctor can unilaterally place a DNR on a patient without consent, without a witness, without a signature, and without a bracelet. So you get two opposites. Well, this is why when a jury decides this way, it should shock anybody with ears to hear, because what's going on is that becomes the legal standard. And so the reason I say it should scare people is because is this how you want to be treated when you go to a hospital? And of course, why can't the jury see that this is not how they would want to be treated? But yet, the programming, there's a lot of programming that has happened, Roy. I mean, I was programmed I'm in the process of deprogramming myself. And, that's a lifetime pursuit at this point, because I don't know how deep the programming is, right?
The more you learn, the more you kind of shocked that there's so much more to it. Yeah, you think you went down a rabbit hole, and it's a ever-ending story, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I mean, so if I think about the percentage, I think I'm pretty awake, but do I even know 10%? It's probably somewhere in that percentage. So this will be my lifetime pursuit, to deprogram and then share what I'm learning with the world. So ultimately,
because I'd like to read that, because you had it in your email or what you've just said, because I don't think people this is really important. This shocked me. It's like the defense, through their experts, said that by being in hospital, you are giving implied consent that the drugs that euthanize Grace were normal in an ICU, so no informed consent is necessary. Doctors informing the family is not even necessary for the two prior overdoses. The third overdose killed Grace. Finally, the expert stated that a DNI, which is equal to a DNR, which is a do not resuscitate, and the doctor can unilaterally place a DNR on a patient without consent, without a witness, without a signature, and without a DNR bracelet. That should scare the crap out of everybody. The fact that
I agree. Then that's why, when you asked me to come on, I know a lot of people have been a little bit sheepish to contact me thinking I'm all, that I'm reeling from the laws. Well, I'm not reeling from the laws at all. This just empowers what I've been trying to say for 3.5 years, that this whole thing is completely corrupt. And, adding to the medical industrial complex is the legal industrial complex. So you can see how they are in bed with each other. And, Grace's trial exposed both of them. It's, I want to certainly focus on what can people do, but I want to just share one other thing about this implied consent idea. And we brought this up at the trial also. When we saw that the judge was leaning towards this idea. So how a trial goes, just zooming out, how a trial goes is first the plaintiff presents their case and then they rest. Then the defense presents their case and then they rest. And then the plaintiff has an opportunity for rebuttal and then you have closing arguments. So that was over the process of just about 3 weeks. Well, in the final day of testimony, when we had plaintiff rebuttal, I was the only witness that came on for plaintiff rebuttal. And one of the main purposes of bringing me back on the stand was to show that the general consent document that was supposedly signed was fraudulent. So, where did we even find this? Well, it was in the medical record. So when we got the medical records, this general consent document was in there. So a general consent document is the document that they want you to sign before they will treat you in a hospital. Well, I was never presented with the general consent document. I knew that. So when I got the medical records, I was shocked. Oh, there is a general consent document. And what does it say? Well, just to give you a perspective of time, it was on October 6th at approximately 2:10 in the afternoon that Grace and I got into the emergency room. This document is dated October 6th at 2:27 in the afternoon. So roughly 17 minutes after Grace and I got into the emergency room. And instead of a signature of mine on it, it says verbal consent for Grace. So that means somebody, now remember, I'm in the room with Grace. I'm not just her dad, but I'm also her advocate and her power of attorney. Somebody who's nameless, they left their name off the document, even though there's a space for it, and they left off the reason that the patient or the power of attorney couldn't sign. That's blank. But somebody had a phantom conversation with my daughter, Grace, who had Down syndrome, and Grace verbally consented to the general consent document. So just wrap your head around that. The jury saw this too. It's Roy. It's really it shows you how far gone our society is. I'm laughing about it, but it's not funny at all. I want to dovetail into what people can do.
And there was another thing regarding that time as well, something about that they claimed she was deaf or something in hospital.
Yeah, so we shared that also because I was explaining how there's lies and errors in the medical records. And so with the deaf, they said that, so the first doctor who supposedly did an evaluation on Grace, which I say supposedly, I testified about this. I never met him until his deposition, but he claimed he met me at bedside and did an evaluation of Grace at his report is dated 3:33 in the morning on October 7th. Well, I never met the man. Well, in that report, he said that Grace had conductive hearing loss. So then you think, well, where did he come up with that? And then that gets carried forward through the entire record. So then, everybody who looks at Grace doesn't, first of all, she has Down syndrome, so they want to stay away from her, but then they think she's deaf. So, there's no communication with Grace. This is, it was all, it was a calamity of errors in the medical records. The treatment of Grace was a calamity of medical errors. And I'm not going on the tangent of intentional at this point, that it'll all come out in God's timing. What I want to do is encourage everybody to prepare for a hospital stay before the need arises. And it's way bigger than a hospital stay because you've got to take back the rights that you have turned over to the state. There has been a spirit of collectivism worldwide where everybody turns their rights over to the state to take care of them. And so, so what am I talking about specifically? Well, the first thing I would tell everybody to do is drop your medical insurance. You do not need medical insurance. In fact, the medical insurance is part of the problem because they only pay for procedures that are incentivized. So once you drop your medical insurance, guess what? You start getting your critical thinking back. So you start asking questions versus the dumb question you ask when you have medical insurance, which is, does my insurance cover it? That's one of the dumbest questions you could ever ask, right? Okay, so then the next, the second thing is you've got, everybody is going to have medical issues someday in their life. So you got to find a medical provider who is not in the system. And, in the United States, the medical providers that are in the system are the ones who take Medicare, Medicaid. So you've got to find providers who are not in that system. And we have a list of those on Grace's website, ouramazinggrace.net, in the resource tab. Then, of course, your paperwork. Of course, you want to get your paperwork in order. So what does that mean? Well, you need a medical power of attorney and you need medical directives. But just realize that paperwork will never save you. I mean, we had Grace's paperwork in order and she's still gone. So the paperwork can't save you, which is going to be my final point, which is you have to have a relationship with an advocate who gets what advocacy is. And that person would be, it's presumably your medical power of attorney, but it doesn't have to be. But that person would presumably be agreeing to be with you and in charge of your health care in the event you can't be 100% of the time. And so it's quite a commitment, not just from the person, but they've also got to be awake. Because if they're not awake, they're not going to be able to advocate. And, so I'll just be blunt. If I knew then, October of 2021, what I know now about advocacy, Grace would be alive today. First of all, I would have never taken Grace to the hospital. But assuming that I did take her to the hospital, she would be alive. Why? Because my perspective of advocacy has changed. And this is the single most important message I could share with anybody relative to saving yourself physically. When you fall into the trap of informed consent, so Roy, you and I have talked about these dialectics that Satan puts in place. And so dialectics are the idea of evil versus less evil. So evil would be, you just turn over all your rights. Well, less evil is the doctrine of informed consent. So interestingly, that was one of our claims in the lawsuit. And now that I understand it, I wouldn't have even put that as a claim because informed consent has the premise or the presumption that the doctor is above you. So the doctor has to provide you informed consent. Well, do you see how that's the satanic trap, the dialectic trap? Because that already starts with you've turned your rights over to the state. So what am I talking about? Well, you've got to reclaim the rights that you've lost. And how that works in the medical industrial complex is to say, I am giving no consent whatsoever unless I give you express written consent for every single thing that is going to take place with me in this surgery, in this hospital setting, whatever it is, an exception being an objective emergency where you basically, you're just hopeful that they choose to keep you alive. But otherwise, that's outside of the dialectic. Is you have bodily autonomy. God gave you that. It's part of the freedoms that He gave each one of us. And it's time to reclaim that ground. And that's my take-home message from everything that I've learned so far in this journey.
And I suppose this is similar because we're talking about hospitals, and we actually talked about MAID as well at one stage, but there's another one that I heard just recently. Somebody was declared brain dead. And of course, they're going to take their organs. And the person woke up. And then they find out, oh, the tests that we're doing for brain dead isn't really accurate. How many times have they done that? And I actually know of somebody that was on my street that they were declared brain dead and they took their organs. So if you hear a story later realizing, hey, this is because of the price of organs. And the other thing is, on previous episode, I'm not sure which one, we discussed made in Canada and how it's kind of euthanasia. And there was one that I just heard a couple of days ago. And it was in Canada, a mentally disabled man, not old, not ill, was euthanized by his family. And they're pushing this kind of made all over Europe as well, everywhere. And I know in Holland, there's a lot of that going on. Like this, that scares me. It's like that people can go in and murder somebody and the medical establishment go, yeah, that's good for us. That is horrifying, horrifying. And they should be in jail for life, every single person associated with doing things like that.
Well, this is the collectivism lie that has become part of the culture. It started, well, a long time ago with eugenics, and then it got codified with in 1905 with Jacobson versus Massachusetts, and Obamacare in America legalized euthanasia before the Canadian MAID program in Section 1553. And, people don't realize that, but it's become part of this idea that the big lie that Satan has sowed physically is that we have too many people on the planet. There's not enough resources. And so all that boils down on a practical level with part of the programming is in America, we have 135 million. So 1/3 of the population is on Medicare or Medicaid. And the cost of that annually is $5 trillion, over 50% of the federal budget. So how they pull this off as part of the brainwashing to the population is that we've got to balance the budget, which of course that's another lie because we have a fiat currency. So there will never be a balanced budget, but they share that lie. We've got to balance the budget. So consequently, how do you balance the budget with 135 million people on it? Well, we've got to ration care, which means that the non-contributing members of society don't deserve medical care. And so then, well, what's rationing care mean? Well, that's how these standards of care that I talked about earlier come into play. So then they can have these standards of care that the doctor unilaterally determines when it's futile to save you, and that hastens your death, and hastening death is murder. So this is how it's been pulled off. I mean, and it's become part of the culture. Every organization, every business has a culture, and, the owner is the one, shit flows downhill, right? So the owner sets the culture in his or her business. Well, Satan has set the culture worldwide. And so this culture then gets implemented by the minions. And the minions, there's no limit to the amount of money that they can be paid. So they're all bought off because of a fiat currency. And some of them actually believe this foolishness that, God created the world. He created it with enough resources, but they believe that, this planet is just, it's not going to handle all the population, and we've got to control the population. And they believe it. So that's where we're at, Roy. I mean, it's if somebody can just connect the dots that we just went through in these last couple minutes, all of a sudden they can see the world through a different lens. Once you see the world through a different lens, then you have a chance. I mean, so, the obvious question is, what's the single most important thing somebody can do today? And the answer to that question is change your belief. Because if you believe in the beast systems that Satan has created, you're next. Once you change your belief, all of a sudden you see the world through a different lens.
And I mean, I've had over 100 court cases, and every single thing I've done, what I've learned is once you kind of realize your sovereignty your kind of power within not bowing to somebody. Because there might be 5% of doctors that actually have your best interest at heart, but I've seen so many times, and I've had a lot of conversations, they're loyal to the dollar, unfortunately, a load of them. I mean, there's genuine ones that really care and they're really finding out systems on how to help you, but most of them aren't. And if you go into that with, here you go, sort me out, you're basically just kind of saying it's the same within a courtroom. You're just giving them the power to do what they want with you, and they don't have your best interest at heart. And you have to take that power back. And it's a hard one. With like what I'd like to know now, because like first of all, what you had said about your man, I mean that's perjury because it was trial by jury. Can he be held for perjury for lying? I mean, saying that he had a conversation with you, that was a complete lie. Every single thing he's done, like I mean, they see that's the thing. I mean, I've been in court. I look at people and they're just lying as if, and you're going, I can't do that. And I just like you're looking at people that are just doing it like they don't miss a heartbeat, like, and it's like they're just saying it, looking straight as if they're to believe them, but can they be held in perjury for actually 100% a lie, is in this case?
Well, I suppose it's possible. I mean, it just, I'm not, we got called to do this trial. I look at it as that chapter is done. So unless something, God motivates me to chase some of these other things down legally, I really don't have a desire to participate in this legal system anymore. We brought the case to light. People got to see what's going on. And, so the technical answer to what you said is yes, but I mean, think through what that even means. How do you even bring that to, weave it through this navigating the legal system. This case, Roy, just to give you a perspective. So I had shared some of the statistics relative to cases in Wisconsin, but there's a much bigger picture relative to the state statutes that are put in place to prevent you from suing. So in Wisconsin, there's a $750,000 cap on medical malpractice claims. Well, this case cost just over $1 million to take it through jury trial. So, I mean, it's, the cost benefit makes no sense logically. So I would tell anybody, don't waste your time in their legal system unless God calls you to do it, because it's not designed for you to get justice. It's designed for them to virtually win every time.
And are you liable then for their costs after the verdict?
We're going to find out. I just had that discussion with one of the attorneys last night. So that's the next thing. So if you just process that, it costs over $1 million to bring it through jury trial, and then they can nail you with their costs on top of it. So,
and how many solicitors did they have on their side, or attorneys, or whatever you call them, how many people were representing their side?
They had 3 attorneys in the courtroom for the trial. Before the trial, there was a lot more attorneys, but what happened is before the trial, we had 5 more doctors and 1 more nurse, and then the state was involved as an attorney. So there was many, many more attorneys, and through the legal principle of proximate cause, we dropped all of those other defendants before we got to the pretrial hearing on May 19th and 20th. So that we streamlined the case, and it was good to do that because, if they would have had, 10 attorneys on their side, the case would have went for, who knows how long, 6-7 weeks. And it would have, gotten away from the central theme of the case, which the central theme of the case were the drugs that killed Grace and the do not resuscitate order. And that's what we made the case about. And if we would have had all these other doctors in the state involved, there would have been all these extraneous issues that, would have been even more complicated than the conspiracy stuff that they painted me with. And, we would have given up 6 weeks of our life instead of 3 weeks of our life. And that would have cost another, it was roughly, it was $100,000 a week to do the jury trial. It's just, it's insane numbers.
Yeah. And just because I kind of know from having kind of big cases as well on myself, it's like whether you win or lose, it's kind of, you're just happy it's over. And what's it like in the household now? And just even like talking to your daughter Jessica and meeting up, are you able to kind of go, all right, and try to get back to normalcy? Because when you're in the middle of this, it's impossible, and you can't just kind of go away and just forget about it. You have to kind of stay deep in it. Are you able to now try to get back to a normal life and have a nice dinner with your wife and your daughter?
Well, Cindy and I had a first dinner since the trial on, what day was it? On Sunday. So that was nice. I mean, it was the first time we got together with Jess and her family over the 4th of July. That was nice, but it isn't. Yeah, life will never be the same. So what does back to normal mean? There is never going to be back to normal, because this is our life. We're in, Cindy and Jess are not in it like I am. Jess has her family, and I'm in this full time. I don't believe I'm going to stop. I mean, the reality is, once you are woken up to this, it creates an obligation to share with other people. It's the focus is, I believe, going to change a bit, because the case was, well, before the last 3 months, I had been working on, extending my research into the idea of how do we get out of this? How do we get out of Babylon? And I started a series toward that end, called Escaping Babylon. And the first part was the physical escape. So I'm working on, I'll restart that in the next couple of weeks, working on that series. But for the last 3 months, it was virtually every single day, not just the 3 weeks of the jury trial, but it was every day on the case. So you live and breathe the case. I mean, I didn't see any media, when, we supposedly attacked Iran. I mean, I'm oblivious to anything. I just was focused on the trial. So, what does that look like? I mean, we're not there yet, Roy. What is going to be our new normal? We're going to find out. But I mean, we're still all, we're all at a different place right now. But I'll just say one more thing. I just finished on Sunday. I wrote a 55-page summary of the trial. And that helped me to cement things relative to the trial. What actually happens with that document, I don't know exactly right now. I'm kind of wrestling with it with the legal team as to where that document fits. As you know, I sent out a short release as to just some summary thoughts, but then I expanded on that, and it's now 55 pages long, and it's done. It's just that might become part of a book. I don't know where any of this fits right now that way, because we're still not through the time period where we can appeal. So will we appeal? Well, that creates another interesting set of situations. So I'm working with the legal team right now to decide that. What's interesting, Roy, is, I mean, you would know this because of your legal history. I did not know this. So I asked the naive question, well, what if we win the appeal? What's the consequence? Right? So, so winning the appeal, guess what the consequence is? I mean, you already know. It means you get another trial. It's like, oh yeah. So we'll see. I don't know exactly where we're going to go with the legal process, but I know where we're going big picture. In big picture, we've been called under Genesis 50:20, which says, what you meant for evil, God meant for good, the saving of many lives, which is happening today. And Grace's death has not been in vain. We've been called to save lives. And, that's, this lawsuit was just it was just a puzzle piece in a much bigger puzzle that we've been called to do.
And like, I know there was like the gag order, but I was also looking at there was the the court order. It was like no supporting clothing allowed. So in other words, you had lovely t-shirts and everything, which I thought kind of strange. And I'm just curious, did the doctors on their side come in with their doctor's outfits, or did they come in like the medical doctor that we saw in the video at the start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I thought they would come in with their white coats, but they did not. They came in with, moderate dress, same as I was. They were dressed for, business attire, and, so it was appropriate. I thought for sure they were going to wear their white coats as part of that, that programming.
So you might touch on the gag order, what exactly it was about. And now, are you allowed to say anything you want because it's all done and dusted?
Yeah, so there were 2 gag orders. One was in July of 23. Yeah, let's see. No, July of 24. So after we were done with the depositions, the judge put a gag order on me that I could not release the videos of the doctor or nurse's depositions. And so I could talk about them, I could clip them, and I could use the audios, but I could not do the videos. And then during the trial itself, we had made an agreement with the judge that there would be no, so this was from the pre-trial through the trial, that there would be no interviews, no media interviews. So that really hampered. I had about 30 interviews booked the week before the trial. I had to cancel all of those based on that agreement with the judge. So then now, what does this look like? And so I'm not under a legal, the gag order relative to the video depositions. I'm still under that. I believe I'll be released from that at some point. But that's minor. The technical gag order that I'm under, or not technical, the practical gag order that I'm under is the same one that I've been under since the beginning. When you start speaking out, you have you run the risk of them suing you for defamation. And the defense for defamation is the truth. So I mean, I do not use hyperbole when I'm talking. When somebody asks me a question, I tell them the truth. So that's my protection from defamation. But I mean, that is the overall gag order that, remember, this system is designed to not have people like me speak out. It's designed that you comply with their orders. So we'll see, if I end up in that realm, that just becomes, just becomes another piece of the puzzle. So we'll see. Yeah, I guess God did not make us to have muzzles. I also, I'm not, he broke me during my own hospital stay 3 days after Grace died. And that's why I can talk about this without getting angry. And, because he gave me the spirit of forgiveness towards the doctor and nurse who did this. This lawsuit was about it was about repentance of the medical industrial establishment. But, specifically the 2 of them who were defendants, if they repent, we won. And so that's still my hope relative to one of the main purposes of the lawsuit. So anyway, that's a fantastic question. No one's ever asked me that about the gag order. And I just gave an expansive answer that you start realizing once you're in the public, you're under a microscope that I don't think about it. That's, I guess, just the best answer. I just I'm just called to speak the truth, and that's what I'm going to do, Roy.
And I think the best thing that you have done is forgive, because with forgiveness, you're freeing it from you. It doesn't matter what they do or how they act. You can never control others, but by forgiving, you're able to move on in life. I mean, obviously, Grace is an angel for you now and your whole family, and it's very important. And what I would actually like to finally say, because I know you've got more commitments, and I'm really glad that we got to do this again. I hope there'll be more when the book comes up. But what I would actually maybe recommend, and maybe just have a think about it, because what I'm seeing is if you write the book explaining everything, it will be heavily censored, and they will actually do their best to maybe remove it or not put on the different things. I'm seeing people doing fiction books where they're actually really talking about something that's going on, but they're doing it as fiction, and then there's no problem. And it's just maybe have a think about that one, because it's a way of getting around their corrupt system.
Wow. That is, that's really good. Yeah, I really like that.
So,
And
Scott,
I've had, now you're the third person in 1 week that has, I wasn't thinking about a book, but then I was on a podcast last week where the man is an author, and he said, with what you got to write a book. And then I was on with Dr. Jane Ruby yesterday, and she said it. Now you just gave me a different angle. So, wow. Thank you for that, Roy.
and you have a way with words, because obviously I'm seeing all your emails and everything, and you just have a nice way of putting it down. That because some of this is complex, some of it is difficult, but you have a very good way of putting it on pen to paper. And I think you'd be serving humanity. And I mean, anyone that's supporting you, then, because you can come back here and tell us when the book is released, and you're always welcome back here. But I'm sure that there's thousands of people that are supporting you. There's thousands of people in your corner. Sometimes people won't even know it, but there's a lot of people that are there. So I suppose, like, because I mean, you're taking a lot of this on the chin. What way can people I know you accept prayers and everything, and you've always done that, but where can people find you, and how can they help? How can they support you?
So the main website is ouramazinggrace.net. And in the upper right-hand corner is 2 things you can do to support us. One is subscribe to the newsletter, which is a Substack. And then the second one is, if you're inclined to give, we have a Give, Send, Go link in the upper right-hand corner. So those are the 2 things people can do to directly support us. This is intense. It's taken a lot. This is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And, it's, it's, but it's what you do when you're called to do something. So I am motivated to keep going. I'm not the type of person who will give up. In fact, I want to share something with you. In my long write-up, so I told you I took the time to do this 55-page summary, and I came up with the last. I'm just going to pull it up on my laptop here, Roy, so you can hear it. So the last thing that I wrote, because somebody asked me this in an interview, and then I finished it, and it's so they asked, what would Grace be saying to me right now? And so then I said to the host that she would tell me, God did it, Dad. And then she would say next, keep going, earthly dad. And then what would I say to her? And this is where I get choked up. And so what would I say to Grace if I could see her again right now? I would say, of course I will, buddy. That's my responsibility as your dad to keep going. So.
Beautiful. And I mean, I'm proud of you and your whole family. I know everybody is, but it's like, I know what you've went through. I know the difficult, and I hope you're proud of yourself, that you actually accept what you're doing. You've done yourself. Like, it is so difficult. I know what it's like. I know how hard, and what you're doing, you're against the odds. You're fighting it. So make sure you acknowledge it for yourself, that what you've done is incredible. And I'm really, really proud of you, Scott. And I thank you, and all the listeners, for what you've done, because you've exposed a lot of stuff. Doesn't matter about the results. The main thing is the book is open, and we're showing them what's going on. So thank you very much.
So thank you, Roy. God bless you. And thank you for having me on again. You are one of you who have become a real blessing since we started this. And I'm talent, people don't realize how few people actually stand with you when you're walking through something like this, and you're one of them, and I really appreciate you, Roy. I hope you have a fantastic day.
You too, Scott. Thanks very much. So
You're
that's all for the Awakening podcast. As I mentioned at the start, every single episode that we've done, I'll put all the links, and I encourage you to go back because we go into big detail. Every single episode was incredible. So sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and make sure you subscribe to Scott's letter. I put that in the show notes as well. Until next week, take care.